So we set up a little experiment before this interview where I sent you the exact proposal that I send out to corporate for speaking events. So when a company reaches out to me and they say, Vanessa, we'd love to have you come speak to our group, I send them a 10-page PDF and I sent that to you. What did you think?
You want me to say that now?
Yeah.
Like for real?
Yeah, for real.
Okay. Listen, no, it's not bad. You have great information. And you're incredibly good at what you do.
Yeah.
But the proposal is backwards and not in the right order at all.
Okay.
Your information is buried, which is a very common mistake where they bury the actual core of the information. And your opening proposal talks about you.
Yes.
And all the things you've done.
Yes.
And nobody who opened the proposal knows what you do yet.
I know.
And that's sort of the problem.
Well, I don't really, maybe I don't know what I do, and so I'm just hoping they'll figure it out.
Right. And I think that when you put out the courses that you have and the things you teach, you're trying to explain to people what you do.
Yes.
But it's sort of buried in there and it's colored with nice words and whatever. And it's very typical where you want to start with like, I know what I'm talking about. I'm good at this. I've been doing this for a while. So now so please believe the next things I say. It's actually the complete and total opposite the way people process information now.
Wow.
What you want to do is say, here's what I do. Here's what I offer. Here's what it is. Here's how it works. And at the end, be like, and I know how to deliver this because I've been doing it for a while.
Okay. So I had it backwards.
Yeah.
So what I did
and mixed up and jumbled a little bit.
Yeah. I know, you have to fix it for me.
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to do. So in this video, I thought we would do something we've never done before, which is not only talking about the book like in theory, but actually breaking down the formula of the book and fixing my pitch.
Yeah.
Let's fix my pitch. Yeah. Okay. So what I did, so what's amazing is you have something called the Wack method. And also part of that method is writing down value statements on Post-it notes.
Yeah.
And so part of my homework before this video was to take what I think are my value statements and putting them up on the board. Now they're probably all in the wrong order. So I thought you would go through the Wack method. We can kind of talk about it together and then we can fill them in.
So the Wack method is a way of ordering your information so that the audience will process it in the right order.
Right.
So that by the time they make a decision whether they want to engage or not, they've got all of the value that you want them to have. Anybody watching knows somebody's pitched you something and you've made that decision whether you want to say yes or no in the first minute, first 30 seconds, first 15 seconds. Exactly, right? So the goal is to lead them in the information in clear steps, and there's 4 steps.
Okay, wait. So I just want to pause for a second, break this down, which is you should think about your pitch in terms of that hierarchy of knowledge, right?
Yes.
So it's the first 10 seconds. You got to get to the first 10 seconds before you can get to the next
That's exactly right.
10 seconds.
Yep.
All right, so should we start with the first one?
What is it?
What is
the first question. What is it? What do you do? What do you offer? What do you do?
Okay,
right?
so here's my what is it.
Yeah.
So my what is it is that I convert science into practical tips.
Yes, that is correct. That would be on your highest level.
I got one.
But you're missing the big one. I was reading through all of these. Likability, translate science, you make people more successful. These are all right, but you're missing the biggest one on what your what is. And I brought my Post-it note to add to this, right?
You looked at these before we got on.
So what you're missing is foremost expert, okay? As you look through your stuff, you have to explain to people that you are the foremost expert in this category. We'll get to why that is, but that is an absolute fact. You're the foremost expert in studying the science of people.
So quintessential mistake I think I was making was I was trying to start off with the how.
Yeah.
Right? And that was actually too far. People just first have to know.
Literally how you did it. Like, as opposed to like you can sign up for a course or whatever. As opposed to how you actually became the foremost expert, which is what we're going to get in the second phase.
Okay.
Which is, how does it work? Like, what do you do? How does it work? First 2 questions, you get through those, that's half the pitch is done.
It's true.
Right
But we got to get through them first, though. I'm terrible at that. Okay, so foremost expert, I convert science. I also think, and then I think this one is next.
You take what is...
PQ equals IQ.
So and it's very valuable, yes. Yeah.
Is it number 1, though?
No, because really, again, you take science into the practical, so what we're going to do is, what you're really good at is high-level human performance.
I like that.
Yes.
I really
and
like that.
And what people normally associate with high-level performance in a business setting would be, you know, they have high technical skills, or they're excellent in sales, or they're good with programming, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But what you teach and explain to people is that high-level human performance is all things, including your PQ, your ability to be charismatic, to influence people, to get people to want to be around you, to be likable. That is a huge high-level performance skill, right?
Okay.
And that is really important. You are the foremost expert in this, and you convert science into the practical, which is so smart, right?
Right. And so also, this is where I get really bogged down in things, which is like, okay, do I talk about the research studies here? Do I talk about how I look at hidden systems? Do I tell them what I teach, like charisma and personality?
This is important because the fact that you do all the research and the studies is super valuable, right?
Yeah.
Very valuable. But it's only really valuable after I understand the context of what you do.
Right.
So this is what I call the are you sure mode.
What is that?
Are you sure means after I've explained it to you, I might be asked like, are you sure that's real? Are you sure it actually works that way? Do you have information, facts, figures, logic, reason? What backs up that statement? When you look at the research you've done and that you've studied, it says like, here's someone for the last decade has spent more time studying the science of people than any other human on the planet. And so that becomes a low-level piece of it, right?
Interesting.
Low-level piece of that.
I had it backwards.
Yeah, and these hidden studies and all of the elements, right?
Because I love science, but I talk about it too early, I think.
That's right. But you want to explain that you're the foremost expert in high-level human performance. You convert science to the practical. This science is real.
Right.
That's really what it is, right? That's what it is. Science is real. PQ is as valuable to an organization, to an individual, to a business as having the technical skills.
So a lot of the times here's where I think, oh, I got to put social proof. I got to put other clients I've worked with. No. Wrong again.
No, because
wrong again.
If you had all of this right, but you hadn't worked with anybody yet, they'd still be interested.
Ooh.
And they'd solve that problem. That's 5% of the issue.
Okay.
Most important is, what do you do? How does it work? Can you actually show me that it's real, right?
Okay, what's next then?
You can teach likability.
Yes.
You can teach being memorable.
Yes.
That's amazing,
and charisma.
Right? And you can teach charisma to someone.
Yes.
That science is real, right?
Okay.
This more successful. That's high-level human performance.
Take it away.
That's not enough, right?
Can I throw it?
Yes, you could throw it. And that's where...
I'm not a high-level human performer.
Good thing that doesn't matter. Look at these PQ elements are right here. This is what I love, right? These are the PQ elements.
Okay,
Look at that.
So here, this is when I begin to get into the meat of it.
Yes.
Before I talk about social proof, before I talk about clients, before I talk about media.
Yep. And now you're going to talk about research and studies and your hidden system. And that's where I think you're missing another one, which is your TED Talk.
Yeah.
Okay. If you've seen Vanessa's TED Talk, you know that she studied all of the TED Talks that had ever been on, the most successful ones, the least successful one, and counted the hand gestures.
Yes.
Okay. No other human would do that.
Yeah, it's true.
No one's ever done that before.
Yeah.
And what that says to people is, I can really give you information based on science. So when you bring in that research studies, you can bring
makes
in
it real.
Yeah, and you have a story here that showcases like, I know how to do this. Here's what I do.
Yep.
Here's how I do it.
Yep.
What it will do for you, and here's the proof that I've done it before.
Which is different than social proof or other media.
Yeah, because like that's fine. That'll come.
Okay, I have a question for you for people watching. So a question I get a lot is, in a pitch, how many stories should I tell? Should the entire thing be a story? So it seems like here, I actually have time for a little story.
Yes.
On average, should people be telling stories during their entire pitch? Not at all.
Yeah, stories is about 3 spots in a 3-minute pitch for stories.
Okay.
The opening is pretty good if you're in a personal situation to explain what I call the reason for being. Why are we sitting here? How did you get to be
like my
here?
recovering awkward person story.
Yes, because what it says is, I used to be someone who wasn't into what I'm talking about now, and then I became someone who is into it now.
Yeah.
What's the story of how you got there? Because you're so passionate about what you do in the science of people.
I'm obsessed with it.
That you're here. You've built your life around it. So there's got to be something good there.
Right.
Explain to me a little bit of how you got there.
Okay, so story number 1 is your origin story. You called it reason for being.
I call it the reason for being.
Reason for being, which is also in the book.
Yep.
The second place for a story is
really when you get into the idea of here's why it works so well.
Right, the why.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's the validation. And usually what I'll say is it ties to your origin story.
Yeah.
If the origin story is when you had the idea of this could be something great, your sort of tie to how great it is when you knew it was great. Like, when did you know you were onto something? When did you know this was going to be your life? When did you know that this was going to help people around the world, that you could actually teach someone to be charismatic?
Yeah.
Like, that's a mind-blowing idea, but when did you believe it?
Yeah.
And that story will help tie together all of these things. And that's why when you look at the TED Talks, it's like, I gave this TED Talk we counted the thing. I knew the gestures. All of a sudden, you have real facts and figures.
Yeah.
That's like an exciting moment for you.
Right.
And that ties together everything that you've got.
And the discovery.
Yeah.
And the last place for story is the end, I'm guessing?
No, not the end. I'll explain the end in a minute. But the last story is the part where your audience should understand and should be on the same page.
Okay.
Where right here, after that, they go like, I totally get it. It's the part where you metaphorically want to say, see what I'm talking about?
Okay.
Like now you understand, right?
So I can actually do this for you so you can kind of hear this as an example. So I'm saying, the foremost expert in high-level human performance, I love converting science into practical tips. And this science is real. We're talking, so how do I do that one? Why do we had talked about gravity before.
That was so good too. I was like, wow, man, it's amazing. That's not what I read, by the way, that you said to me.
That was not what my proposal said at all. So when I say science is real, I obviously believe the science is real. I believe it works.
Well, listen, here's the element, right? Is that you're talking about what people understand about PQ and IQ.
Yes.
IQ people understand, hey, you're a smart guy, you got to score.
Yes.
Hey, you know how to program a computer. Hey, you know how to make things in the lab. Whatever it is that those people do, that's a lot of times what people assume is the valuable skill. That's what they train their employees on, right?
Yeah.
What you're saying is the science of PQ is just as real as any of that.
Right.
And that's why we talked about gravity, which is like, can you touch gravity? Can you feel gravity? Odds at a casino. Do you know, like, are they real? They're damn real.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where this fits in here, right? Where it's like,
there are these hidden forces that are driving our behavior.
Science is real,
just like
right?
gravity.
Yep.
We don't see it, we can't feel it, but we know it's there.
Yeah, and this all becomes the science of personality.
Okay, so our PQ is just as important as our IQ. We spend so much time on technical skills, but we need to do the people skills.
Yeah.
I can use the science of PQ to teach you the science of personality, how to be more likable, how to be more memorable, how to be more charismatic. And I do this with real research studies that I've conducted over the last decade. For example, I was fascinated with TED Talks. I wondered, why do some TED Talks go viral and some don't? So I decided to look at thousands of hours of TED Talks. Yes, I really sat down and watched thousands of hours, and I counted different variables: eye contact, smiling, hand gestures. And we found a pattern that the most popular TED speakers use an average of 472 hand gestures in 18 minutes, whereas the least popular TED talkers use an average of 270. And I realized, boom, right there is physical evidence there's a difference between people who are popular and people who aren't.
I mean, come on, who's not going to buy that, right?
Yes.
But how much more valuable is that now than after you explain how you do it? And by the way, we haven't even wordsmithed this yet. This is based on bullet points.
Yeah.
You've spent a decade doing this, and you basically explained it in a bunch of bullet points.
Yeah, it's true.
As well as you've probably done it the entire time, right?
Right, yes.
And that is really cool.
And that story worked because it made that, what you were just saying, it made that aha, like it made the audience be like, I get it.
That's right.
Okay.
And it becomes like, oh, wow.
Okay.
It's that moment. And then my last one that I thought for you as I went through your stuff is... That's where you use your lab. Because what I've noticed a lot of times is your stuff talks about you run a lab, right?
Lab,
And that's a really cool phrase, but that's so far beyond where you are today, right? Like you've taken everything you've learned in the lab and developed in the lab and turned it into practical knowledge and exercises and things that people can actually be taught, which is amazing.
And these days I'm doing more teaching than research.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's where I would use what I'd call your new lab.
Down here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is... This is why you've done this. This is where you became. And that's where, in your case, that's that next level of story, which is you ran a lab. You started out as basically a lab technician in a way.
Running different
And based on what you learned,
Yeah.
That's why you're here. Do you see what I mean? Like, if you had done that, you'd be here where I am today. You'd be trying to teach this because I put in the work, which is really cool.
And that's where I end on, or am I ready for the ending, or is there something missing at the very end?
So it's fine. The last sort of question in the Wack mode is really the idea of like, can you do it?
Can, the C.
Yeah, the C. Can you do it? Now,
by the way,
very
it's on
small.
the book, WHAC. So can you do it?
Yeah.
Can you do it?
Basically, like, have you been doing it before? What does it cost? Are you available?
So
can I
this
book
would be,
you?
my last bullets are like media, logos, clients.
Right.
Okay.
That, by the way, social proof, if that's valuable in that world, those things, because then maybe it makes it a little bit better. But if it doesn't even work, it's fine. People will look past this. I'll tell you, The Biggest Loser, the biggest show my company ever worked on.
Yes.
Anyway, I had very little to do with getting that thing on the air, like as in none. Because the guy who pitched it, high level executive, but had never really produced a television show. Wow. So he pitched the show and the idea, the network was so into it, but he couldn't make it. The C, can you do it? The answer is no. So conventional wisdom might be like, oh, the whole thing's dead. But it's like, no, we'll just pick up the phone, call a company who can make this, and the show's on the air. Wow. That's the same thing. If you get all of this right, can you do it? Like, what does it cost? Or when's it available?
Logistics.
It's just like logistics. And
So
that's
I
what
think
you want.
this is the biggest problem I see people make in pitching is that they start with this.
Yeah. Oh, do they ever?
They start with what's impressive. They start with the logistics. They start with the mechanics.
Yeah.
The can you do it? But you can't do, and now I'm realizing you can't do the can you do it until you describe what it is in the first place.
Because here's the way we make decisions, right? We make decisions based on 3 areas. We conceptualize, then we contextualize, then we actualize.
Okay, what does that mean?
So we conceptualize, we have to understand what it is and what the concept is. Then we conceptualize, or we contextualize to what it means to us.
Right.
How do we use it in our lives, how it's going to benefit us, what it means in the real sense.
Yes.
Then we actualize. Once we go through that process, then we're like, okay, how do I get it?
Okay.
Now, what you want to do is extend that decision-making process as long as you can for someone so that you can get in all the value that you want.
Right.
Because
before they get to hear
Right,
it.
because the statements that you make that they don't have context for aren't valuable to them. And I'm sure people in your audience will have had this happen where they pitch an idea, it seems so perfect, but the person's like, yeah, I don't get it. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Because only you understand the value. You have to lay it out. Okay. And so if you can extend this and do a good job, you can extend that decision-making process to about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And that gives you enough time to get all the value in. So then they're making a decision based on
value.
actual value, right?
And that's when your price becomes better.
That's right.
Okay, how do we end? How do I end this pitch?
After all of this, are you ready for the big crescendo, the 4th of July fireworks ending?
I'm ready.
It's nothing. There's no ending. I've experimented with every version of an ending, and you don't want to end with it.
Because you've done 300 different projects.
Yeah. And that's the ones that sold to a network. Like I've developed thousands of them.
Right.
The ending doesn't mean anything. There's no closing. There's nothing you want to do. In fact, normally when I pitch or present, I literally just throw a logo up and just stop talking. Just stop talking. Because you've said everything.
Yeah.
So what you don't want to do is tell your audience, I've been planning this and I pitch it to everybody and this is a pitch, not an actual conversation. And if you ever watched Shark Tank, you know those guys, the people who pitch at the end and they come up with some clever thing. So Shark, who wants to dive in with me, right?
And then you feel like you're being pitched.
You're like, oh God, right? And you see their eye roll. It's because
true.
I just took you out of the moment. And in Hollywood storytelling, we call that the suspension of disbelief. You get into the story so much that you let us run through. And if you took my favorite movie, which is like Shawshank Redemption or Braveheart, if at those end scenes a dolly with cameras walk through or whatever, it wouldn't change the context of the scene. It would just ruin it for you. Why? Because it would pull you out of the scene. And when you're pitching someone or wanting them to come to your way of thinking, if you show them that you've rehearsed it and made a pitch and done some corny ending.
Every single thing I pitch, every idea I pitch, was basically a pass. And I was in the Lux Hotel one time, and I was pitching one of my family members who was out of town, and I told him about the show that Paramount TV had just passed on, and he was like, oh my God, that's like the greatest show I've ever heard. And I was like, I know, I can't believe they said no, right? And it was good because I needed that at the time. I needed a little ego boost because it had been a grind out there. So I pitched him, you think that's a good show? Wait till you hear this show. And I pitched another show. And he's like, oh my God, I can't believe how great that is. You're telling me that's not going to be on TV? It's like, I know, it's criminal. So I'm going on that, my ego's getting filled up because it's like, now I'm a superstar and there's starting to be a crowd around there. And eventually a guy came up to me after and he goes, man, you're so great. Could you teach my clients to do what you do? And I said, well, no, you can't teach how to sell reality shows. It's not the way it works. He's like, no, can you teach my clients how to pitch their ideas to people without putting them to sleep? I said, I don't know, I never tried that. So I went down to Florida. He has an investment conference. There's a lot of small cap public companies. And the way they do it is they go to these little ballrooms and the CEO of the company gets up and pitches a group of investors. So I go sit on this oil and gas company and I get up there and it is literally the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was 23 minutes of a guy trying to explain why you should invest in his company and I had absolutely no idea what he did. So I said, holy smoke. So I worked on his slides a little bit. He was pitching 9 more times over the 3 days. And it got better and better, which was exciting. He said, I have to come work with you. You have to train me how to do this. And I had never done that before. I said, oh, come on out to LA. I guess I can figure that out on the weekend. So what was interesting is this is literally my very first client. And I broke down his oil and gas company just like I would do if I was, say, breaking out a TV show. And then I went back to my normal life, and it was really fun to work with him. But later, he called me about 3 weeks later and left a voice message on my phone. And he was telling me it's been going so great. And then his voice started to break. And he got emotional. And he said, you know, I used to hate being on the road. I used to hate doing this. And now I love it. And my stock is up and my wife's happy. She thinks you put something in my drink, but I will never be able to repay you. You have changed my life. And I was like, no network president had ever said anything like that to me before. And I'm basically one chromosome away from a caveman. So it's like, my ego is like, someone say nice about Brant. Me like this. Go get more of that. You know? So the investment banker guys, if you know any investment bankers, very easy to be friends with them if you make them some money. And so the client had paid me. They got to complete their raise, so they brought me more clients. It was fascinating because as I went across the country and worked with more people, it became a driver for me to be able to help people simplify their message, and I couldn't get enough of that. And what was interesting was, listen, I've been in front of the camera, I've been behind the camera, almost 20 years I spent in Hollywood on a day-to-day. I can make literally anything on screen happen. I have people on my team right now that worked on Avatar. So I can make the most dazzling, beautiful, unbelievable 3D graphics come to life at the snap of a finger. But as I was traveling the country and working with company after company, the same theme kept coming up. And it was simple. That was the only thing I kept saying. In fact, I kept saying, simple is the new sexy. Come on, let's bring it together. Let's be sexy. We can be simple together, right? And the number one phrase I kept saying to every single person when I would sit down with these high-level CEOs at big companies was the same thing, like, oh my God, just stop talking. Like, you've said enough already, right? That's because in their world, they're so consumed by what they want to say. And in life today, in the marketplace, it's not what you want to say, it's what needs to be said. And the ability to separate those two things is paramount in today's world. When I worked on the book, it was all about showing people how to say less and get more, and instill confidence by the power that you bring into simplicity. Now, I wrote a Forbes article. I read a column for Forbes, and I wrote this article about the 3-minute rule. And this was the 3-minute rule is based on, in an edit bay, we never let a scene or we never had a promo tape on any of the shows that I've sold go longer than 3 minutes. And so this 3-minute rule became my highest read Forbes article, and that spun into the book today, which is the 3-minute rule. It's been on the bestseller for about 12 weeks now, going really well, but it shows people how to use Hollywood storytelling to simplify their message. So the 3-minute rule simply says, everything about value about your business, product, or service must be conveyed clearly, concisely, and accurately in 3 minutes or less, okay? In those first 3 minutes, you have to illustrate value. You have to capture and maintain your audience's attention, and you must create engagement. Here's the fact. If you haven't convinced your audience to buy in those first 3 minutes, the odds of you doing so after will plummet astronomically. You've all done it, right? We know how this works. The initial decision from someone is formed in less than 3 minutes. Who's had someone come and pitch them something, and you know within the first 2 minutes that it's a no, right? Who's had that? Okay, how about the first minute? Who's known in the first minute? Okay? How about the first 30 seconds? Come on. How about the first 10 seconds? Someone comes to pitch you something and you know you're going to say no. That poor bastard. He worked his entire thing and you're not even giving them that, right? That's the world we live in today. So before I go too deep into what the 3-minute rule is, I want to tell you a little bit about my story, how I got here, and how it relates to what you guys are doing today. I don't get a lot of chances now with the book and what's been going on to speak to audience where I can really impart wisdom, and a lot of time it's a lot of entertainment I do. But I started in a small town in Canada. And yeah, exactly, Canada, yay. Canada's not a really entrepreneurial friendly place, I have to say. And I struggled my entire life to figure it out. I was what's called a serial entrepreneur, right? And everybody in town thought that was pretty cool, all the businesses I started. The truth was I started new businesses because the other ones failed. I mean, that was a serial entrepreneur to me. It wasn't sexy or cool like it is today. There was no Gary Vaynerchuk helping us out, making entrepreneurship cool. It was because I had no marketable skills, no real education, no ability to hold a job. Oh, guess what? You be an entrepreneur. That's how it works. Back in the day, that's how it went for me. And so I had an idea for a TV show, as people do every once in a while. And so I put it together to try to how do I make a TV show? It was really cool. I heard that they do a pilot. Why don't I just make a pilot of my funny idea? So I did. And it was funny because this was the news article that went up while I was doing this, and it says, mystery surrounds party girl show and rules. That's because I hadn't had it figured out. I had no idea what it was. I just kept throwing around, it's a pilot, right? Nobody knew what that was. It was fun. So I made the show, spent my own money. Don't ever do that, okay? Spent my own money on it, and I remember going around trying to promote it locally in my little town. To do one episode, I painted my fancy PT Cruiser and deckled it up and went around. It was great. So off we went. And it didn't work because Canadian television is not like US television. So, as an entrepreneur, when you find something doesn't work, you just do it bigger. So I just went and got a bus. Went across the rest of Canada doing it. Nope, sorry, that didn't work either. So, so then, of course, after going to Canada, I went to Mexico, and I had done all this work to put this together. And I could not sell it in Canada to save my life. And as I was living in my parents' basement suite with my 2-year-old child, my wife, and my parents telling me I got to go get a job, I got one meeting down in the United States. And in the United States, things went a little differently. People saw the amount of work and effort and how much I put into it, and they assumed that I was a producer and that I had done this for a living or something. I hadn't, but they thought I did. So I was able to sell the show to NBC, and I ended up getting a job and moving down to the United States, which was just a fascinating exercise for me. My wife made $41,000 at IBM at the time, and I worked really hard to spend all of that money on my stupid ideas. And my first job in the US was $110,000 as a development executive. And I was like, okay, we're going to move down to the United States. They're going to figure out I'm a fraud by the end of the year, but I'll have saved enough money, I'll go back, it'll be fantastic. And what was interesting was I had sold a show early, and it's because my agent had brought me across. And when I came down to the United States, TLC was my favorite network. I had watched it for years, right? And there was a time when I had sold the show, a pilot to CMT early in my career. I hadn't even been there a year. And we were in one of those focus groups in Vegas, with the glass, and they bring people in, pay them $25 and a sandwich to tell you terrible things about your idea. And we're sitting there, and I'd never even dreamed of being in this kind of room. And I'm sitting with the president of the network. And he says, we're talking, and I just met him, and the guy who's running the focus group comes in and says, oh, hey, Brant, Paul, do you guys want to do the slide or the dial test for the audience interaction? And the president of the network looks at me and goes, I don't know, Brant, you've done this more than I have. What do you want to do? Well, Paul, I actually like the slide, but, they're really similar. Let's do the slide, guys. Okay, great. Okay, that's Hollywood in a nutshell. But within 4 years of working there, I had actually had the job of the head of programming at TLC, and I had sold John and Kate Plus 8 to TLC, the highest rated show they'd ever had. And then things went well. I ended up producing The Biggest Loser. I created Bar Rescue. I did Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition, went in 50 different countries. I did the first season of MasterChef with Gordon. And I did about 30, 40 other TV shows on the air that you've never heard of, and about 300 that I sold that never made it to air. That's the way Hollywood is. It's been an interesting and crazy process to go through that. And it's been fun. But my agent really early in the process said that when you pitch a show, you got to pitch it at the highest level. That's the only way people are going to take you seriously, because when you came from Canada, that's what it looked like. Okay? So if you keep doing that, you're going to get this reputation. And one day I was in the lobby of CBS, and out walked Simon Cowell. He just pitched, and I had to go in after him. I was like, oh, crap, I can't follow Simon Cowell. This sucks. He says hi, we hug, oh, yeah, yep. And I see him look over my shoulder. And there's Mark Burnett just walked in. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going in after me. I'm wedged between Mark Burnett and Simon Cowell. And by the way, we are on the same level today as we were back then, right? Like, I am this, they are here. So it was an awful feeling. And I started to get this wave of panic. There's no way for me to impress these guys. None whatsoever. So I went into that room, and I just talked the idea. I didn't try to impress the network president. I didn't try to share stories. Hey, let's do lunch. None of that. Hey, here's the idea. Here's how it works. Let me tell you how we're going to produce it and here why we think it's great for CBS. And out I went. Just to get out of there. And we sold the show. And people started talking about how fast and easy and effective that pitch was. And I got this reputation of being the best pitch executive in Hollywood for not doing very much work. For basically just simplifying my idea. And that was sort of my process as I went through. But really what I was trading on in the early days was perception. That's how I sold the shows. That's how I became who I was, because people thought a certain thing. Even though I'd never been on set before, never worked in television. I didn't go up through the mailroom at William Morris. It's not the way it worked. But perception is such a powerful element, and in today's world, we deal with it on a daily basis. It's just really misunderstood. Perception is reality, okay? That's a fact. And we know that. And in Hollywood, more so than ever, but in the world you're in now and everywhere else, social media, it's even more so like that. But perception is manageable, okay? You can manage what people see about you, what they think about you, the impression they get. You can manage that. I mean, we know that because we think of that as perception equals your branding, okay? People talk about branding all the time. Branding is not a logo. It's not a color scheme. My 19-year-old son can put a logo together in 5 seconds. That's not a brand. A brand is perception and what you create. But what's interesting is a brand is crafted. You craft that. So if you think about it, perception is crafted. And that's really important, is to craft the perception. We talk about all the entrepreneurs you see on Instagram that you don't like, or you think they're phony, or they rented a Ferrari, or whatever that is. But they are crafting a perception specifically, and it's important to do that. So let me give you a good example of how that works in Hollywood and why it's different and how to combat that. If you look at these 3 shows, all shows I had various involvements in, but if you look at someone like Guy Fieri or John Taffer from Bar Rescue, you most likely know their name. You see them in magazines somewhere. They've been on TV. People talk about them. Not one of these shows has ever averaged 1 million viewers a week. Not once. And you're talking they're on the air for 20 weeks a year, and then they go into repeats, okay? Not 1 million one time, and you know who Guy Fieri is. Whereas if you look at Markiplier or Amanda Cerny, internet model, like, most people have never heard of them. And Amanda has 23 million followers. Every single video she puts out is 3 million. Every single one, every single day. Markiplier, 10 million views, every single one. Why is he not on the red carpet going to Hollywood premieres? Why is he not in People magazine? Why is he not on everybody's lists? He's 20 times more eyeballs. Why is Colin Farrell a movie star? The guy has never been in a good movie. Ever. Nobody's seen him in movies because they're terrible movies, okay? That's something called the barrier to entry, and it is the core of what Hollywood does. It creates a barrier to entry. If you want to be a movie star, you have to go through the most unbelievable hoops, the crucible of Hollywood, to finally be chosen and anointed to have a movie, okay? TV stars in your house every day. A movie star, you used to have to leave your house and go to a movie to see. You had to go pay money and go sit in a theater. That's why movie stars were up here. Television stars were here. Radio was down here. Internet stars down here. Social media stars down here, okay? That's also the problem in the podcasting world today. I started a podcast years ago. It was awesome because everybody's like, oh my God, you have a podcast. Oh wow, that's so cool. How are you doing that? Well, you guys all know, we all know, anybody can have a podcast. Everybody has a podcast. You can get access to those podcasts easily. So it's lowered the value of them overall, particularly for the general entertainment, mainstream, interview-based. It becomes harder. That's why you're seeing the micro podcasting do so much better, because it's the barrier to entry. To have a micro podcast about a very specific subject, you have to be an expert in that subject. That's a barrier to entry.